Well, welcome to Backyard Woodworking. This is part 2 of making a simple stool. I cut up a hunk of 2x10 here for the seat. It has a hump, a crown here this way, or a cup, as some people call it. Now, I drew a line right across here. Right about here is about 3/32 high. That means that the bottom here is up about 3/32. This part right here is shaped like this. Now that makes a point here on all 4 corners. Them points are going to be facing down on my planer. The board is pretty flat other than that. So I'm going to take that top piece out by running it through the planer. Now I'm going to take a second to explain something. I used 2x10s, some 2x6 I had. This is all leftover wood. I'm using it because I have it. I have a table saw. I can make any size piece of wood out of it I want. I can make a bunch of 1-inch pieces or 1/2-inch pieces or any size. But you can go to your box store and go buy 2x6s and 2x4s and some 2x2s and make the same stool, and all you have to do is cut parts, basically the length, and angle the legs. That's the difficult part would be, for most people, would be cutting the compound angle of 7 degrees. If you didn't want to do that, you could make the stool square. In other words, the top and bottom stretcher would be, say, 10 inches, and cut them 90 degrees on each end, make a 10-inch square stool and put a top on it. You could do that. Doing it the same way. Use 2x4s for your stretchers, 2x6 and a 2x4 for a seat. Cut it down, with a circular saw. The only real tool you need is a screw gun and a circular saw and a sander, and a square and a pencil. With that said, I'm just showing you what I had. So I'm making my legs. My legs are only about 1.25 inches square. After I ran them through the planer and the joiner, and I sand them down, it might be a little bit less. These are about 1.25 inches thick also. Should be about the same size as the legs, because I ran them all through the planer together, so they'd come out that way. Now the seat, I can make any thickness I want. I have about 1 inch and a half thickness, and I measure this different places, it's 1/16 less than 1.5 inches. Been drying for a couple of years, but I'll tell you, this is 32 inch by 9 1/8, and this is one heavy hunk of wood. It is solid, very, very solid piece of wood, and it's dry, it's not wet. So I'm going to run this through the planer, and we're going to see what comes off of it. Now probably I'll get a board. I'm looking for maybe 1 inch, 1 1/16 inch and 1/8 thick. I'll get the best thickness I can out of the wood I'm working with. 1 inch would probably be okay. Now after I get it flat on both sides, first I want to get this flat. When I see that planer going across the top section here, and it's planing from one end to the other, I know I got this side flat. Then I can throw this down on the planer and then take these edges off. These are my points, and cut this part and this part until the knives start hitting the center of the board. And then that's my thickness. This thing rocks like a rocking chair leg that way. If I put it through the planer this way, it would rock this way, that way. I'd never get it straight. That's why here I have a reference area, the 4 points. That's the way you run it through a planer. And I try to make the pieces lengthwise something you can work with without having it too long. And you can't put too short in the planer. You can feed one piece in, and before it gets all the way through the roller, put another piece so they feed like this so the rollers don't pinch. But if you have too short a piece in there, it could get caught and make a mess. So read your directions on your tools, all your tools. Safety's always good. It keeps your fingers where they belong, on your hands, not laying on the floor or some other place. So read your directions on all your tools, all your manuals, shop manuals. I have safety glasses. I use these, hearing protection. Some people wear the mops with antennas and listen to music and everything else. I don't need all of that. These work fine. They meet most codes in most places. They're a pain sometimes, but heck, I can't hear anyway, so it don't make much difference. Alright, well, I'm going to set up the planer, and I'm going to run this through the planer, and I will be right back. Surface here and here. Now this is pretty nice. I'm going to take this wood here, and I look down there. It looks pretty darn straight. I have one side here. This is just a little bit of a bow in. So this is the side that bows in. It bows in like this. I'm exaggerating. Just a hair here in the middle. I'm going to put this part against my table saw fence and cut this off. And that'll give me a square side here, a good reference side. And after I take that side, and then I can put that against the fence and cut this side, and then I got a square piece of wood and flat on both sides. And I'm going to take this, and that'll decide my seat width. I can cut this in half. This is 32, so it'll give me 16. I'm looking somewhere around 14 and 14 and a half for a seat, so I have plenty of wood both sides. So I just run this through the table saw. I'll cut this in half. I have a sled, homemade, and I'll just throw it on there and cut it right in half. Oh, and by the way, my thickness on this piece, I got out of this, time I got done, now you're dealing with what they call a 2x10, so it's, rough cut 2 inches, and it's 1.5 inches measurement. I got about inches and 5/16 roughly. So I'm not doing too bad. That's a nice thick piece of wood to make a nice seat, nice and solid, and it lays perfectly flat on my table here, which is perfectly flat. And the way I made it, it makes it a pretty flat table. Looks good. All right, we're going to go from there. We'll set up the table saw and we'll cut this. center through the table saw, I have two nice edges on the board, and it's flat. See, it doesn't rock. This table saw is flat, and it doesn't, no bing bang or bum on any end there. It's good to have. All right, now what we're going to do next is cut this in half. Now the best way to do that is to remove the guard from this saw. I'm going to unplug the saw for safety, take out the insert. Now, take out the riving knife. Get that out of the way. Now I want to cut this in half. So, sawdust gets on my sled, and cobwebs, spiders in here around here are terrible this year. All right, now this is a sled, homemade. I use what they call a 5-cut method to square this back fence with a blade. Got a pair of calipers. It works very well. Now we're going to cut this. I got to get my tape measure. Tape measure. Sorry about that, but I left my tape measure over there. Approximately 32. Don't have to be perfect. At 16, half of 32. Now, I got an extra ½ inch, so I have to raise the blade higher because I've got to get the blade through here. So raise the blade so it comes through. Now see, with this, it's much safer. I can push it through. This is really accurate using the 5-cut method. I'll go through that someday in another video, how to build one of these. Very, very easy to make. There's a lot of information on the web about it, on YouTube and other places about making these. There's 10 million designs, but this is just mine. All right, I'll have to plug the saw back in and we'll give it a cut. And you have two nice cuts, real nice pieces now. Cut not exactly in half, but not bad. Pretty good edges. That's a 60-tooth blade. In fact, I can actually do what I can do this here too. I think what I'm going to do is no, whatever. that we have this sliced in half, my next decision is going to be putting it together. Now, if I push this together, that's not too awful bad, but it could be better. Now, I want to figure out my grain patterns. Now, you look at your wood. Now, I have a similar grain here and here, which doesn't look too awful bad if I do that, and it's a nice clean joint here, too. Fits fairly nice. Now, this gives me, we're about 17 3/4, and it should be 16, which I got 16 here, and this is just a smudge under. It doesn't matter because this is going to be, both ends will be cut anyway. Now, what I think I'm going to do, I kind of like it, the grain match that way, and let me see, I'll probably have 14 and a half from 18, say 17 3/4, so I'm only going to have 1 inch, and if I go here, depends on where I move the grain on it, I'll probably have about 1 7/8 off, something like that. Okay, well, it doesn't much matter. We'll decide on that. Now, what do we want to make? An octagon shape, where we'd have like that. Very simple to do. Take a square, cut the blank square to the size you're looking for, divide it thirds, mark them 45 from that point out, do it both ends, you got a nice octagon. Works pretty easy way of doing it. Then I could round the edges over, so I'd have a piece, sides like so. And that makes a nice thing. Or I can make a round one. I'm kind of leaning towards the round, and we can make a nice round top here right on the table saw. First thing we'll have to do, though, is to build a jig, and I think what I'm going to do is glue this blank up here. That's a pretty nice joint right there, really tight. And I think we're going to glue this up, and we'll go from there. I think we'll build a simple jig. It'll only take a couple of minutes to build it, and we'll go with that. Okay. Okay, we're going to throw a little glue on this. Good old-fashioned, just yellow wood glue. This is not going to be sitting around the whole world. Outside where it's going to get killed. A little brush. I think it'd be too awful particular with this. It's just going to, if I need a little more, add a little more. I'm not the most particular person when it comes to glue. I try to keep some of the mess down. Just want to put some on these edges. I check these edges are really good close. I ran it again through the table saw just to shave it with my Freud blade. That's a good blade. I could use a hair more there. It ain't nothing really fancy here. This glue doesn't take that awful long to set. Now, I don't have a lot of clamps This is what I call an extremely low budget operation. But we make do with what we have. Now I have a can of water there. I got this little clamp here. All I gotta do is just put enough on it to hold it. So the glue sets up. It ain't that, it's not going to be that particular because, see, I'm getting good squeeze out. Push it over here, so it's flat. And here. And what I do is just bring this up here. You can take one of these. I don't think these are going to be long enough, so we're going to be with two, I guess. These don't fit quite the distance I need to go. I'm pretty darn straight. Well, the edges are really straight, as long as I'm good this way. Good. They're flush. All I do is just take a little bit on the edge there. Ain't much here, just the worst of it there. Alright, now where this set up here, leave that set up. I'm going to get grab a couple old pieces of stuff and just broke this in half. So I don't glue it to my bench. I just bring it up in the air. Like this. And like this. I'll just hold it up in the air. I'll let it dry. This sets up. I can take a scraper and we're flat. That's perfect. All along. That's pretty darn good. I can sit a couple hours in the clamps. Alright, now, sorry for bumping around so much, but I can't move the camera, do this and do that. Alright, I'm going to show you how I'm going to make a circle jig next. Okay, now for some reason my camera decided it wasn't going to work that time when I was making this. So I'm going to go over it real fast. I took a piece of old MDF I had laying around and a piece of this plastic runner material. Screwed this to the bottom using a square to get it, you know, reasonably centered. Now I lined this runner here up. It was this long. I ran it through the table saw, cut this off. So now this is just flush with the blade. Measured in approximate center this way, and taking a square again, come over here and got the center, you know, approximately this way, and that gives me a point to put this. Now this is at 7 1/4 inches from this edge. That's half the diameter of my seat. And there's a circle cutting jig. By taking my seat, say this was my 14 1/2 inch, or right now it's about 16-inch piece, I can drill a hole in it, in the center of it, and then cut the corners off. That gives me 8 corners if I cut all 4 corners off. So now I got an octagon. You cut that off and then you got 16 corners, and gosh knows what you call that, but it's a 16 corner shape. Then 32, then 64. When you get down there like that, it's almost round. When you got it so it's almost round, you can sneak it up on this blade. This blade will be sticking up, and just spin it around, and you get a circle. Simple as that. Now, Laney had that on his, Laney Shaughnessy, on his Simple Design Vicala site, which is listed on my site as one of my favorite sites, or whatever. Anyway, this on the side of the page there's a section there with all your featured sites, I think they call it. At any rate, he's listed there. You can, in one of his videos, you can see how he used it to make a stool. And I've seen it on, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 different sites on YouTube that you can make a simple circle cutting jig. Now, this is just a temporary thing, so it just slapped together. I put a nail in it and cut the head off the nail. I used about 1.25 inch roofing nail. So I'll drill a hole about the size of this nail. I have a small drill bit in the middle of my stool seat, and so it'll sit flat down on this and just spin it. That's all there is to it. So I figured I'd go over that again because it's important that you know how this jig was built. If you've never built one, a lot of you probably use it or whatever. You can also cut it out with a jigsaw. There's another option. Just compass in the middle of your piece, size you want, and run a jigsaw around it. And then when you run a router around it and sand it off, it'll look round. It'll be pretty good. If you don't have the table saw, you can do that. Or if you don't want it round, just cut the 4 corners off, and then you get an octagon shape, and then router that. That's the way when I saw this stool design first built, that's what they did. They just cut the corners off. Well, I prefer to go around. That way I'm not sitting on one of them sharp corners if I swing around on the stool for any reason. The less corners, the better I like it. But that's only my taste. Okay, the next jobby here on the list is the sanding. We'll get to that, and I'm not going to spend much time on that. It's just like watching grass grow or paint dry, as far as I'm concerned, sanding. You go get a sander and sand it. Simple as that. I'll sand it probably from 100 grit up to about 180. That's good enough for what I'm making here. Like I said, this is a shop stool. It's not dining room furniture. Okay. Alright, I got a sander here. I got some 80 on here. Some of this is pretty rough, so I'll use some 80 and sand it down.